I've always believed that you can feel a storm before it breaks, not just the kind that rattles windows, but the kind that tears through your life. That morning in Rockport, the sky over the harbor was unusually still, the gulls eerily quiet, and my chest felt heavy for no reason I could name. I stood on the balcony of our third-floor condo, looking out at the boats bobbing against their moorings, and told myself it was nothing, just another cool May morning. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Cole had left his coffee untouched, a bad sign in itself. My husband thrived on routine, strong coffee, quick news check, then hours shut away in his home office, tinkering with projects for his tech company. For weeks, he'd been under pressure from a competitor who wanted to merge with him, except the offer sounded more like an ultimatum. Cole refused, and the pushback had been relentless. Surprise inspections, mysterious delays with shipments, even veiled threats slipped into phone calls late at night. By 8:30, I'd called him twice, straight to voicemail. That in itself wasn't alarming. Sometimes he lost track of time, but by 10, I'd tried again, nothing. I told myself he was deep in work, maybe wearing those noise-canceling headphones I hated because they made him unreachable. Still, the unease wouldn't let go. I left the clinic earlier than planned, telling the front desk I wasn't feeling well. The drive home was only 10 minutes, but the closer I got, the harder my heart pounded. Pulling into the lot behind our building, I spotted Cole's black SUV in its usual space. So he hadn't gone far. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. I was halfway across the lot when a voice cut through the quiet. Natalie Pierce. I turned. Two men stood by the shadowed edge of the building. They weren't locals. Their city-cut coats and heavy boots didn't fit here. They walked toward me, unhurried but deliberate. Every instinct screamed at me to keep my distance. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to sound steadier than I felt. One of them, a thick-set man with a scar along his jaw, smiled without warmth. "You'll give your husband a message. He needs to agree to the terms he's been offered. All of them. If he wants things to stay pleasant." The other, taller and gaunt, chuckled under his breath. "Otherwise, he might spend a long time looking for you, and he might not find you at all." The words dropped into me like ice water. My hands tightened on my bag. I thought about running, but it was only 6 in the evening and the courtyard was dotted with moms and kids returning from the park. Broad daylight, I told myself. They wouldn't try anything here. Still, my pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. "I'll tell him I managed." "Good girl." The scarred man tapped 2 fingers to his temple like it was some kind of salute. Then both of them climbed into a dark SUV and peeled out of the lot. I didn't move until the sound of their tires faded. My legs felt shaky as I swiped my key fob and pushed through the front door of the building. The elevator sat open, waiting, but I couldn't bring myself to step inside. I've never liked confined spaces, so I took the stairs 2 at a time, driven more by adrenaline than fitness. Inside our condo, the silence pressed in. "Cole!" My voice sounded too loud. No answer. I walked through each room. Living room, kitchen, bedroom, nothing. Then I saw it. His phone, face down on the coffee table. Cole never left without it. Something cold settled in my gut. I picked it up, thumbed through the call log. Empty. No incoming, no outgoing calls. Even the texts were gone. My breathing quickened. I checked the ensuite bathroom, the spare room, even the balcony, empty. I sank onto the couch, phone clutched in both hands. I told myself to stay calm, to think logically. But all I could picture was Cole walking out the door, leaving behind a trail of silence and a warning delivered by strangers. And then another thought struck me. His SUV was still outside, which meant he'd gone on foot somewhere close. But where? That was when the first real wave of panic hit. Because if he'd walked away willingly, he could have told me. And if he hadn't, then someone else had decided where he was going. I set his phone down and pressed both hands to my face, willing my thoughts to slow down. Maybe he'd just stepped out to the store. Maybe he was on the phone in the lobby, or talking to a neighbor. But why would he leave his phone behind? Cole was never careless with it, especially lately. He'd been jumpy for weeks, checking it even at dinner, as if waiting for bad news to land. I walked to the window and scanned the street. Familiar cars, the neighbor's Labrador pulling on his leash, the mail truck parked crooked at the curb. Nothing out of place, and yet everything felt wrong. Minutes dragged. I told myself I'd wait outside, just in case. I slipped my keys into my pocket and headed down to the front steps. The air smelled faintly of salt and fish from the harbor. I sat on the wooden bench near the entrance, arms wrapped tight against the late September chill, eyes tracking every figure that passed. An hour ticked by. No Cole. My stomach tightened with a hollow ache. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket and dialed the one person I could think of. "Erin, hey, can you come over? I think something's wrong." Her voice sharpened instantly. "Nat, what happened?" "I don't know. Cole's gone. His phone's here. And 2 men stopped me outside. They told me to tell him to accept some kind of terms. Erin, they knew my name." My throat caught on the last word. "All right, I'm coming now. 20 minutes, tops. Don't go anywhere. Lock your door." I managed a shaky, okay, and hung up. Back upstairs, the condo felt colder than before. I sat on the couch, hands clenched in my lap, listening to the muted hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak from the building settling. Every sound felt magnified, like the silence was waiting to be broken. When Erin arrived, she took one look at me and shut the door behind her with more force than necessary. "Tell me everything. From the beginning." I went through it all, the phone, the SUV, the men in the lot. She listened without interrupting, her eyes narrowing in thought. When I finished, she sat back. "If what they said is true, it's serious. You can't just brush this off." "I know, but what am I supposed to do? Call the police and say my husband's gone without telling me? They'll ask if he's done this before, and I'll have to say no. They'll think he's just cooling off somewhere." "Maybe," she admitted, "but something about this stinks. Those guys didn't just happen to be there." We stayed up waiting, the hours stretching thin. Midnight came and went. By 1 a.m., the weight of exhaustion and dread had settled deep in my bones. Every time headlights swept across the window, I thought it might be him. Every time they passed, the disappointment dug a little deeper. By 2, Erin's jaw was tight enough to crack. "All right, we give it 1 more hour. If he's not back, we start making calls to hospitals, police, whoever we have to." I nodded, though I doubted sleep would come even if we tried. The clock's red digits glowed in the dark. Somewhere beyond these walls, Cole was out there, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't coming back the same way he'd left. By 3 a.m., the silence was unbearable. Erin grabbed her phone and a pad of paper, the kind she used at work, to jot quick notes. "We're calling the hospitals first," she said, already scrolling through the list. I listened as she spoke to the first receptionist, her tone clipped and professional. "No, not admitted tonight. Thank you." Call after call, the answer was the same. No one matching Cole's description. We moved on to the morgues. My hands clenched so hard they ached as I listened to Erin repeat the same details. Male, early 40s, 6 feet tall, dark hair. "No, nothing," she'd say, her face tight with relief each time. But relief was quickly replaced by the gnawing question. If he wasn't there, then where was he? Finally, she called the police department. "We'd like to report a missing person," she began, but the officer cut her off. I could hear the boredom in his voice, even from across the room. Unless Cole had been missing for more than 24 hours, there wasn't much they could do. Erin hung up, muttering something under her breath. "They're useless, and honestly, I can't blame them. This doesn't look like a crime yet." "It feels like one," I whispered. She looked at me for a long moment. "I don't want to scare you, Nat, but this isn't adding up. Those guys today, they weren't here for a friendly chat." I rubbed my eyes, wishing I could scrub away the memory of their voices. "So what do we do?" We keep you safe, she said firmly, until we know more. Her words had barely settled when a sharp rattle at the front door made us both freeze. We looked at each other, then toward the sound of the lock being tested. Erin was the first to move, padding silently to the peephole. She pressed her eye to it, then jerked back slightly. 2 men, she whispered. Not the same ones from earlier, but they're not here to borrow sugar. The rattle became a more deliberate shake, then a muffled voice. Police! We need to speak with you. Erin's eyes narrowed. She leaned in again, studying them. No badges, no radios, and she glanced back at me. One of them has a tattoo. I know that design. My brother used to run with some questionable people. That's not a cop's ink. A cold wave ran through me. So they're pretending, she finished. And we're not opening that door. She pulled out her phone and dialed the real police. Her voice dropped to a whisper as she explained the situation, giving her address and the description of the men. We waited, the sound of my heartbeat loud in my ears. The voices outside went quiet. Then footsteps retreated down the hall, and seconds later, the front door to the building slammed. When the knock finally came again, it was firm but measured. Erin checked the peephole once more before opening. 2 uniformed officers stood there, real badges glinting under the hallway light. They're gone, one said. We'll patrol the area tonight. Do you know who they were? No, Erin answered quickly. And I don't think we want to. They took a brief statement, promising to follow up later. As soon as the door shut, Erin turned to me, her expression grim. This isn't safe anymore. We can't stay here. Not with people showing up in the middle of the night. I nodded, my throat tight. She was right. The condo suddenly felt less like home and more like a target. And if those men came back, I wasn't sure the locks would be enough to keep them out. Erin didn't waste time. Pack a bag. Only essentials, documents, cash, a few clothes. We leave in 20 minutes. Her decisiveness steadied me enough to move. I pulled my carry-on from the closet and started throwing in whatever my hands landed on. Jeans, sweaters, my stethoscope, a photo of my parents that had sat on the nightstand since we moved in. When I reached for the small safe tucked behind my shoes, my hands were shaking. I punched in the code, swung the door open, and froze. It was empty, completely empty, except for my passport. Erin stepped into the doorway. What's wrong? The money's gone. All of it. My voice cracked. She stepped closer, peering inside. Nat, I hate to say this, but if only you and Cole had the code, you think he took it? Her expression said she didn't want to answer. I think it's the simplest explanation. I swallowed hard, fighting the sting behind my eyes. There wasn't time to fall apart, not now. I shoved the passport into my bag and zipped it shut. Erin was already making calls. I know a place. Private cabins, no paperwork, cash only. It's off Route 3 near Acadia. You'll be safe there. Safe. The word felt foreign. Within minutes, we were in her car, the dark streets of Rockport slipping past in the rearview mirror. The harbor lights dwindled, replaced by the black silhouettes of pine trees against a cloudy sky. Erin kept her eyes on the road, her knuckles white on the wheel. You'll need to keep your phone off, she said. If those men are looking for you, it's better they can't trace a signal. I nodded, staring out at the blur of forest. The further we drove, the more unreal it felt, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. 2 hours later, we turned onto a narrow gravel road. The crunch of tires echoed in the stillness. Ahead, a scattering of warm yellow lights glowed between the trees. Erin parked near a small office building with a wooden sign that read Seabrook Lodge. Inside, a man in his 50s greeted her with the kind of familiarity that told me this was no ordinary check-in. Erin spoke, quietly, handing over a wad of cash. He nodded, slid a key across the counter, and didn't ask for my name. The cabin was small but cozy. Knotty pine walls, a stone fireplace, a single bed draped in a quilt. I dropped my bag by the door and sank onto the edge of the mattress, the fatigue of the past 24 hours finally catching up to me. Aaron crouched in front of me. "I'll come by in a couple of days. Keep a low profile. Don't go into town unless you have to. And remember, you're here under a different name. No one needs to know you're Natalie Pierce." I managed a faint smile. Who am I then? Whoever you need to be to stay alive. She squeezed my hand, then straightened. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is a new day, even if it doesn't feel like it yet." When the door clicked shut behind her, the cabin seemed impossibly quiet. Outside, the wind rattled through the pines. Somewhere in the distance, waves broke against the shore. I told myself I was safe now, but safety, I was learning, is a fragile thing. The first night in the cabin passed in fragments. Short bursts of sleep cut by the sound of the wind in the pines, the distant crash of waves. By morning, my nerves felt raw, but I forced myself up. A shower, a change of clothes, a careful look in the small mirror above the sink. I needed to look like someone who belonged here, not like a woman hiding from ghosts. I decided to walk to the lodge's dining hall for breakfast. The air outside was crisp, tinged with the smell of salt and pine. Sunlight filtered through the trees, dappling the gravel path. For the first time in days, I let myself breathe all the way down to my lungs. I was rounding the corner of my cabin when I nearly collided with someone. "Whoa, sorry," a man said, stepping back with an easy smile. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a faint shadow along his jaw. The kind of presence you notice even before you see the face. "It's fine," I said quickly, instinctively putting a bit more space between us. "You must be my new neighbor," he said, nodding toward the other half of my cabin. "I'm Grant Ellison." I hesitated, then offered my hand. "Natalie." I stopped myself just before giving my last name. "Well, Natalie, welcome to Seabrook Lodge. You here for vacation?" His tone was light, but his eyes, gray, sharp, felt like they saw more than I was saying. "Something like that," I replied. He gestured toward the path. "Heading to breakfast? They do a decent omelet. I could use the company, unless you've got someone waiting." "I don't," I admitted. The dining hall was a low log building with big windows that looked out over a slope of evergreens. We took a corner table. A waitress brought coffee, and I noticed she seemed to know Grant well enough to skip the small talk. "So, what do you do?" I asked, more out of politeness than curiosity. "I work in investigations," he said. "Law enforcement." That explained the eyes, the way he seemed to be taking in every detail without trying. "Here on a case?" He smiled faintly. "Here to get some perspective. A change of scenery never hurts." I didn't press, and he didn't ask much more about me. Instead, he told a few dryly funny stories from his work. Carefully vague, but enough to make me laugh despite myself. After breakfast, he glanced toward the rec hall. "You play pool?" "I have," I said cautiously. "Come on, let me get beaten by the new neighbor. It'll keep my ego in check." I didn't mean to say yes, but I found myself following him. The pool table was worn, the cues mismatched, but the game felt strangely grounding. For an hour, we talked about nothing that mattered. The weather, the best trails nearby, his opinion on lobster rolls versus crab cakes. When we stepped back outside, the sky had clouded over, the wind lifting strands of hair from my face. "Thanks for the game," I said. "Any time," he replied, and there was something in the way he said it, steady, certain, that lodged in my mind long after I'd returned to my side of the cabin. That night, lying in the dark, I thought about the ease in his voice, the way he'd kept the conversation light without making it shallow. For the first time since Cole vanished, I'd gone a few hours without replaying the threats in my head. And that realization was both comforting and dangerous. Erin showed up 3 days later, her SUV pulling into the gravel lot, just as the late afternoon light turned the pines gold. I met her halfway, relief flooding me at the sight of a familiar face. "You look better than I expected," she said, squeezing me tight. "I've been keeping busy," I replied, careful not to glance toward the other half of my cabin. We spent the first hour just talking mundane updates from home, small jokes to ease the weight hanging between us. But eventually her expression shifted. "Any word from Cole?" I shook my head. Nothing. Not a call, not a message. Aaron's gaze softened. "Nat, I don't think he's coming back the way you want him to." Before I could answer, a sudden wave of nausea hit me hard enough to make me press a hand to my mouth. Aaron's brows shot up. "You okay?" "I'm fine. Just probably didn't eat enough today." She stared at me like she could see straight through that lie. "When was your last period?" I opened my mouth, closed it again. The truth hit me like a slow, cold tide. "Over a week late," I admitted. Erin was already rummaging in her bag. "We're fixing this mystery right now." 10 minutes later, I was staring at 2 bold pink lines. "I'm pregnant," I said, the words barely audible. Erin smiled, though her eyes were damp. "You're going to be a mom." I sat heavily on the bed, my hands instinctively resting on my stomach. "Cole's baby." The phrase felt strange in my mouth. That night, after Aaron turned in, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Grant was standing there, hands in his jacket pockets, expression unreadable. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He didn't waste time. "I need to tell you something. I've been looking into your husband." My pulse kicked up. "Why?" "Because I don't believe this is just a business dispute." And I was right. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. "Cole owes a lot of money to very bad people. Not because they forced him into a merger, because he borrowed it. A sum large enough to make people do desperate things when it's not repaid." I gripped the back of a chair. "That doesn't make sense. We had savings. We weren't in trouble. Maybe not the kind of trouble you knew about." Images flickered in my mind. Cole's late nights, his clipped phone calls, the way he'd started locking his office. What happened to him? Last confirmed sighting was on a security camera outside a strip mall in Bangor. After that, nothing. My guess? He changed his appearance, maybe even his name. It was too much. I sat down, feeling the world tilt. "So he's gone. By choice." Grant's gaze softened. "Nat, I'm sorry. I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but you needed to know what you're up against. These people might use you to get to him. That's why you need to stay hidden." I thought about the empty safe, the warning in the parking lot, the silent phone, and then about the life growing inside me. My chest ached with a complicated mix of grief and resolve. "I'm pregnant," I said quietly. Grant blinked, then nodded once. "Then that's all the more reason to protect yourself. And the baby." For the first time since Cole vanished, I felt the shape of a decision forming. I couldn't control what Cole had done or where he'd gone, but I could control what happened next. And I wasn't going to let his choices destroy what I had left or the child I carried. The next morning, I woke to a knock, not the cautious tap of a friend, but the steady, confident rhythm that had to be Grant. When I opened the door, he was holding 2 paper cups of coffee and a small paper bag. "Breakfast," he said simply. I took the cup, the warmth seeping into my hands. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to, and there's something I need to talk to you about." We sat at the small table by the window, steam curling from the coffee between us. Outside, the pines swayed gently in the wind. "I've got a friend in Portland," he began. "Runs a pediatric clinic. They've been looking for another doctor for months, someone with your skills. It's a private facility, good pay, stable hours. More importantly, it's secure. Access control, cameras, the whole 9 yards." I hesitated. "Grant, I can't just waltz into a new job. My life is a mess. I'm pregnant. You're a qualified doctor. You're exactly the kind of person they need. And I've already spoken to the director. He's willing to bring you on without the usual interview process." I shook my head slowly. "This is too much. You've already done so much for me." He leaned forward. eyes steady on mine. "Natalie, this isn't charity. It's a chance for you to start fresh. Somewhere Cole's mess can't touch you." The words landed heavier than I expected. A start fresh. I hadn't realized how badly I needed that until he said it out loud. "I don't even have a place to live in Portland," I pointed out weakly. "Already handled. The clinic owns a few apartments for staff. One just opened up. Fully furnished, secure building. You'd be close to work. And yes, I made sure it's in a neighborhood where you can walk outside without looking over your shoulder." I stared at him, the weight of his planning sinking in. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't look away. "Because you deserve more than surviving day to day. You deserve to build a life again. And I'm in a position to help make that happen." The coffee had gone lukewarm, but I kept my hands wrapped around the cup, grounding myself in its heat. "What if I'm not ready?" "Then I'll wait until you are. But I'm telling you now, this opportunity won't be open forever." Later that afternoon, Aaron drove me into Portland to see the apartment. The building was brick, with tall windows and a view of the harbor in the distance. Inside, it smelled faintly of fresh paint and cedar. The furniture was simple, but comfortable. The bedroom had a soft gray quilt, the kind that made you want to fall face first into it. I walked through each room slowly, imagining what it would feel like to wake up here, to come home here after a day at work that didn't involve looking over my shoulder. Aaron leaned against the doorway, watching me. "It's nice, isn't it?" "It feels safe," I admitted. She smiled. "Then you should take it. And if you won't take my word for it, take Grant's. I think he's got a good head for these things." By the time we drove back to the lodge, the decision had settled in my chest like a steady heartbeat. I was going to take the job, the apartment, the chance. Not because Grant had arranged it, not because Aaron thought it was smart, but because for the first time since Cole left, I could picture a future that wasn't defined by what I'd lost. The move to Portland felt like stepping into another version of my life, one I hadn't dared to imagine in the chaos of the last few weeks. The clinic was everything Grant promised. Bright, well-equipped, filled with staff who greeted me warmly but didn't press for details I wasn't ready to give. My first day, the head nurse handed me a schedule with manageable appointments, nothing like the frantic pace of my old job. It was almost unsettling to feel unhurried. The apartment became my haven. Mornings were quiet, with sunlight spilling across the kitchen counter as I sipped coffee and listened to the distant hum of the harbor. Evenings, I'd take short walks around the block, my coat pulled tight against the breeze, my hand resting lightly over the growing curve of my stomach. Grant stopped by often, sometimes with takeout, sometimes just to talk. He never pushed, never asked for more than I was ready to give. Instead, he became a constant, the steady point in a world that had spun out from under me. Erin noticed, of course. One night over dinner at my place, she leaned across the table and said, "You know he's crazy about you, right?" I laughed it off, but my chest warmed in a way I couldn't quite dismiss. When Liam was born, a healthy, dark-haired boy with a grip stronger than I thought possible, Grant was there. He held my hand through the delivery, his voice steady when mine shook. The first time I saw him cradle Liam, the careful way he supported that tiny head, something in me shifted. The weeks after were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, but they were nothing like the hollow exhaustion I'd felt when Cole's disappearance consumed my thoughts. This was different. This was a fullness that made the tired worth it. Grant didn't just visit, he stayed. Sometimes he'd take Liam in the middle of the night so I could get a few hours of rest. Other times he'd cook breakfast while humming under his breath, the scent of coffee and eggs drifting into the bedroom. On Sundays, Aaron would join us for walks along the eastern promenade. We'd push Liam's stroller down the paved path, the harbor stretching out beside us, the masts of sailboats swaying gently. There was laughter again, real laughter that came from a place deeper than relief. Years passed, the seasons in Maine painting our lives in cycles of snow, salt air, and the gold light of fall. Liam grew into a curious, fearless little boy who loved climbing rocks by the shore and asking impossible questions about the sea. The clinic promoted me to lead pediatrician. Erin got married, her reception a noisy, joyful night where I danced with Liam on my hip and Grant's hand steady at my back. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a life I'd chosen, piece by piece, out of the wreckage of what came before. And it was mine, completely mine. It was a warm September afternoon when I finally drove back to Rockport, not for a reason tied to fear or some unfinished thread from the past, but because Liam wanted to see where the ocean is louder. We parked near the lodge, now under new ownership, and walked down the familiar path lined with pines. The air smelled the same as it had that first week, salt, pine, and something untamed, but it felt different in my chest. Later, we found the rocky overlook where the water crashed hard against the cliffs. Liam climbed onto a boulder, arms spread like he could catch the wind. Grant stood nearby, one hand resting on his shoulder to keep him steady. I let the sound of the waves fill the silence between heartbeats. For the first time, I could stand here without the weight of unanswered questions pressing into my ribs. Cole was gone, and whatever choices had taken him from me were no longer mine to carry. I had faced the storm, and I had built something stronger in its wake. Liam scrambled down and ran to me, his cheeks flushed, his hair wild from the breeze. "Can we come back here every year?" he asked, slipping his small hand into mine. I smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, the steady presence of Grant beside us. "Yes," I said, "every year." As we turned to go, I glanced back once more at the horizon, the endless sweep of blue meeting sky, and felt the last quiet pieces of my old life settle into place. Not with bitterness, not with longing, just with the certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The road ahead was mine now, unshadowed, and for the first time in years, I couldn't wait to see where it led.